Hello and welcome back to Planet Nibiru, where anything is possible. Today we're going to talk a little bit about banking. Fun subject, right? Well, not really. It's basically major boring stuff for the most part. But once we get past the basic stuff, things will get really interesting, I promise. So, what do banks do? Essentially, they create debt. By lending money to be repaid with interest, banks create debt. Debt may not always be a bad thing though. Sure, the practice of lending with interest is condemned by all major religions in one form or another. In Christianity and Islam, it is outright forbidden. And Judaism usually is not permitted when lending to other Jews, but it is allowed when lending to non-Jews. So, it's pretty much frowned upon by all those who would call themselves religious. What other things are universally poo-pooed by all religions? Well, murder, rape, theft for sure. So when you think about it, it kind of puts lending for profit in a pretty bad company, huh? But the practice is legal, and we have all grown quite accustomed to paying off loans at interest. Even though it destroys our chances at wealth, makes us pay sometimes as much as 3 times the value of what we're buying, and keeps us enslaved to working jobs that we don't like so we can buy things that we can't afford to impress people that we don't like. I think I'm starting to get an idea of why the religions banned the practice so long ago in the first place. So, think about this. Let's say you buy a house for $100,000. Now, that's not going to get you a whole lot of house unless you live well outside of a major city. But it's an easy number to work with, so humor me. A $100,000 loan, and let's say you have really good credit and you get a 5% interest rate. You're still going to end up paying back over $193,000 back to the bank. So all those years of paying everything on time and making sure your credit was really good allowed you the privilege of only paying double for your house. Yep, you're one of the good guys, so come on in and we're only going to charge you double. Not like that slacker neighbor of yours who had a few late payments here and there and whose credit score is a few points lower than yours. He was lucky to get a 7.5% interest rate. His $100,000 loan will cost him $251,717. Rather bad news for your neighbor, right? Well, don't look now, but remember Bob down the block? Yeah, the one who has to work 2 jobs to pay the bills and keep food on the table? Well, Bob's credit really sucks. Sorry, but there isn't a better way to say it. Bob has a bunch of kids and another one on the way, and his credit score is just enough to allow him to buy a home, but the loan he had to get is what's called a subprime loan. Bob's interest rate is 9.25%, so his $100,000 loan is going to end up costing him $293,000 before it's all said and done. That's right. Bob, the guy who can least afford to pay 3 times for his house, has to do just that. Ain't that a bitch? Well, yes it is. It's a bitch called profit. So now that we know exactly what banks do and pretty much how they do it, think about if you had a bank and you could loan money to nations instead of individual people. First off, the size of those loans would be absolutely massive. So you'd need a ton of money on hand just sitting around to lend out. But let's just say that you have that. And you lend it out to countries, large and small, and you encourage them to spend frivolously because now you effectively own that country through debt. Well, that's what the large IMF banks do. They lend to countries through debt. They gain leverage over those countries, basically usurping the rights and freedoms of the citizens through the debt they generated. Now that we understand all that, we can get to the juicy parts. At the beginning of 2016, there were only 4 countries in the world who were not on the IMF system. So out of 195 total countries in the world, 191 pay interest on loans made by the IMF. That means that the IMF is essentially collecting interest from almost every single person on this planet. One bank with almost 7 billion people indebted to them by no action of their own. This makes the IMF obscenely rich by default and makes you wonder why all these countries need to borrow so much money. But let's get back to the sentence that we first started off this section with. About those 4 countries. The countries are Cuba, Syria, Iran, and North Korea. Do these ring any bells with anyone? It's a coincidence that these countries are all supposedly evil enemies of the United States? Well, let me roll back that just a bit, because Cuba pretty much has officially opened its doors to the US again, and we're now on fairly decent terms with them. Tourism is opening up, and as far as I can tell, we are on the path to normalizing relations with Cuba. Syria, on the other hand, is in the middle of a civil war that came out of nowhere. Most sources blame the Arab Spring uprisings for the civil war, but I actually found one that put the blame squarely on the shoulders of dust storms. Yeah, you can't make this stuff up. But if you believe that the people of Syria just decided out of nowhere that their country sucked and they wanted to oust the leadership, I have a bridge for you at an amazing price. And as far as the dust storms, well, meh. The people who started the uprising and civil war in Syria were allowed in under the auspices of the Arab Spring, where they were called refugees, and they were just running into any country that didn't have a fence up to slow them down. Now, of course, the people who lived in Syria didn't like all these new people running through their country, and all sides were pretty much hyped up for a fight, and it was pretty easy to get that going at that point. So now they got a civil war going on in Syria. Iran has been a target for many, many years now. How long have they been on television with both CNN and Fox vilifying all of their leaders? We've been talking about Ahmadinejad as a crazy man for about at least the last 10 years, right? I think there's a new president in Iran now, but lately we seem to be focused on Kim Jong haircut. He's been the favorite villain for many years as well. Each new president, with I think the exception of Barack Obama, seems to ramp up the rhetoric a bit more with North Korea. And we always hear these crazy stories that get stranger and stranger as time goes on about the little Korean man with the blind barber. One day he's feeding someone to his attack dogs, the next day he's having people executed by anti-aircraft guns. Do you have any idea what an anti-aircraft gun would do to a human body? Of course, they also say that he has a harem of young girls, and the list of villainous traits goes on and on. Funny how the leaders of these countries who have no debt always end up dead or in jail, huh? Ever wonder when Bosnia and all the countries in that region joined the IMF? Remember this guy? Slobodan Milosevic? Know where he is now? What kind of bird don't fly? Jailbird. But the point is that the remaining countries are not already in debt to the IMF. Not one of them is viewed as a decent country that anyone gets along with. All of them are supposedly run by villains who kill their own people and molest children. And we're talking about war with them, or we're already involved with war with them. By the way, the US is technically still at war with North Korea. We have a ceasefire, but we've never declared peace. So what does that say about banking, the IMF, and the way countries are or aren't allowed to manage their finances? I don't want to soil you with my opinion. I think you should look at all this data and develop your own opinion. If you think that it's all just a coincidence, so be it. If it's just the way that the banking works and that's okay with you, sweet, nothing to worry about. But if you think that maybe, just maybe, there's something more to it, I implore you to do a little more digging and come up with your own opinion of what's going on in the world. You can read about the creature from Jekyll Island and how a meeting in Georgia in 1910 helped shape the financial system of this country and many others. It started the Federal Reserve in the United States. The information that you learn from this small bit of research about banking will surely set you off in a bunch of different directions. There will be tie-ins from the Titanic to JFK, and there are so many ties back to the time when America was bought into the fold that it will truly blow your mind. We may cover more of these tie-ins in later videos, but for now, we simply wanted to point out that maybe these wars have less to do with liberating the poor oppressed citizens of Syria and whatever other country, and more to do with making sure that the poor oppressed citizens are being oppressed by the right oppressors. Of course, it could all be one big coinkydink. Thanks so much for watching. We look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Please like, subscribe, and comment, and we'll see you soon.